Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A Theater Near You. I am your host and kitten pot pie, Kris Randazzo, and I'm joined this evening, as always, by fundamental misunderstanding of the word comedy, Paul Giroux.
Good on, mate. That's what I am, is a fundamental misopportunity, whatever you said.
And villain, whose last name is the same as his first, Doyle.
Villain? I think not. That man is the most misunderstood character that has ever been. He's actually the hero of the movie, and let's get into that right now. The reason he's the hero of the movie is threefold. Number one, Einstein's invention, which he tried to circumvent for the purposes of alcohol, led to the atomic bomb, which killed millions, billions, I don't know, a lot of people, if we want to count the offspring that didn't happen. More than five. A lot of people, right? He tried to stop that, right? So right there, not a villain. Number two, Marie Curie was on a path to marry or be with Einstein. She was going to later go on to discover radiation, and that was going to kill her. He was trying to save her there. That's number two. And number three, as someone who's had poor train experiences in Europe, let me tell you, when he starts to take offense to the Bushmen getting onto his train car and hitting on the woman that he's doing I'll grant you, lackluster effort to hit on, save them both from the smell that will permeate that car in the middle of the summer. Look, he's a gentleman and a scholar who wasn't understood in his time. He wasn't understood in the early 90s when this movie was created. And I think you still misunderstand him today.
Oh, I beg to differ, Sean. I think we were watching two totally different movies. I mean, first of all, he was, completely insulting to Marie Curie. Did you see him trying to mansplain the gramophone to her? Whatever else he did to talk down.
Hold on.
Wait, no, I gotta follow up on him stealing the theory of relativity, right? He's not saving the world from nuclear annihilation. He tried to kill all those people at that opera or the science awards. Granted, it was misinformed, but I think he was certainly the villain of the movie, Sean. He was not the hero.
I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure. Because as I sat here and watched it and was force-fed this concept that young Einstein was the hero of the movie, yet sat there in pain, agony. And
the villain was Yahoo Serious.
Yeah, the villain's Yahoo Serious, who plays young Einstein. I don't know. And then he tried to shoot him 20 minutes before the end, and all I could think is, God, I hope this bullet makes its mark. I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough call to call him a villain.
I will say, whether he was the hero or the villain, I did not expect to be as bored by a movie about a guy that invented beer and rock and roll.
And the scope on the pistol, I don't know if he was supposed to have invented that or just managed to find one, or if he stole that idea too, but I did love that for some reason. The idea of just putting up a flip-up scope on a little revolver, that doesn't make any sense. This barrel's not going to support accuracy over long distance, but I love the effort.
All right. We gotta get through the intro. We gotta tell people what they're listening to.
No, we're in it, Kris. We can't go back.
This month's letter was why, goddammit.
This is happening!
Once again, what would Paul's pick, Young Einstein? Why didn't Yahoo Serious' career take off after this masterpiece? We're gonna find out. We're gonna debate this freaking movie. Gentlemen, how did you watch this movie?
You know damn well how I watched this movie. I watched it in your house with you and your wife and Greg.
We watched it on Tubi.
We watched it on Tubi.
Which mercifully, the hero of the movie were the commercial breaks, which didn't even function for some reason. Tubi's, every single time it went to a commercial break, Tubi just kind of stopped. It would just hold on a blank screen. I had to keep pausing and unpausing. So it kind of skipped the commercials, but at least they gave us breathing room to stop having to watch the movie for a few minutes, which was lovely. I drank a glass of chocolate milk and I ate nothing because I am on my quit being a fat bastard diet. Sean, however, brought some sort of concoction.
So what I did was I tried to make it work, as I do. And so first I went to the store and I looked for Smarties. And let me say this.
I had thought brain food. Remember that stuff?
Brain food?
No, smart food. The popcorn, the smart food.
Oh,
That was my
I
thought.
didn't even think of that.
That was my thought initially, and then I was like, maybe I'll just pop some popcorn. But then I wasn't really in the mood for popcorn, and you showed up with Smarties.
No, I didn't. I did.
You told me you were going to get Smarties
wanted
on the
to show up
phone,
with Smarties. I don't know if any of our 9 listeners have ever gone out and tried to buy Smarties. You can't.
Yeah, you can only get them in like big bags for like Halloween stuff.
Right. Like, and I was fully prepared to buy a big bag of mixed crap that just had some Smarties in it and also came with whatever, blow pops and jawbreakers or whatever else. I was like, fine, whatever. I need some Smarties. I looked everywhere, could not find a place to sell me a single thing of Smarties, even in a mixed situation, right? Because apparently, I've never bought them before. They just appear from time to time. Apparently, it must be a Halloween thing, or I don't know. I couldn't find them, so I went with Nerds because Young Einstein, Smarties, Nerds. It kind of almost, I don't know, whatever. And then I looked up online. I was like, well, let me find a drink because Kris is, I mean, that man's bordering on alcoholic. We got to rope him in. But no, for our listeners that don't know, Kris doesn't drink at all. But me and his wife and Greg drink, and I found
That's
a drink.
How they tolerate me.
I found a drink online called Einstein on the Beach, which is also the name of Counting Crows song, which Kris is a big Counting Crows fan, and it's also the name of a play, apparently. And depending on what website you look at, this drink is named after either the Counting Crows song or the play. But it doesn't matter because they all agreed on what the drink was. The drink was absolutely horrendous. I mean, it tasted fine. It was vodka, raspberry schnapps, lemon lime soda. Those 3 sound fine. That sounds like the beginnings of a reasonable drink. You got all right, a little alcohol, a little mixer. All right, this sounds good. Sure. Lime, lemon, raspberry. All right. We're all on board. Right? Fair enough. And then the 4th and final ingredient is Irish cream liqueur. That's right. We're going to pour cream into lemon lime and see how that goes. Let me tell you how it goes. It curdles instantly because that's how science works every time. So we made 3 curdled drinks, and me and Karen and Greg proceeded to drink those 3 curdled drinks. Karen, Kris's wife, pointed out that the drink went down easier than the movie. But I'm jumping ahead. Let's let Paul take over. Paul, tell us how you watched it and what you drank and ate while you did so.
I think you blew it, Sean. I think that maybe you should have, I don't know, waited till the movie started before you drank the drink, because, he might have explained these theories to you. He might have, he did that plenty in the movie. He might have been like, curdled, Also, it's also possible that the play, the Counting Crows song, and the drink are all named after this movie.
Oh, obviously.
He was on the beach.
As was the man, in a weird twist of fate. Einstein himself was named after this movie.
Time travel.
Yeah, I watched the movie in the late afternoon. Sherry and Nate and I have all been watching Lost when Nate, finishes school. We had finished Stranger Things, and we were like, what is a thing that we could all watch together? What's the thing that he would like to watch with us? And I recommended Lost. And Nate's really into it. We're in the middle of season 3, and he keeps asking what's going to happen next.
Have you seen this before?
Oh yeah, I mean, we watched it when it aired, but that was
So you're a bad parent.
Well, I said this. I was like, I don't know if you were going to be satisfied by the ending. We didn't like it.
But it was a ride.
That
show was so much, even when it was terrible, because it got bad. But it was still so interesting to watch and then talk with other people about. It was a pretty wild ride. I don't regret watching that show to conclusion.
I enjoyed, and I watched it after it aired, right after it aired. When the show finally ended, I was like, all right, let me go watch this whole thing now that everyone's talking trash on it, without knowing what happened. It is super enjoyable. I thought it was really good right up to the very last moment, right? Right up to the last couple episodes there, where you find out that everything you've been built up for, everything you've been hoping and dreaming about, is just going to be dashed on the rocks and they're going to do exactly what they promised they wouldn't do. And I don't know.
The smoke monster just being a dude was the thing that really bothered me more than anything.
Oh, God.
Well, I'm also finding as we're watching it again that there's a lot of stuff I don't remember. Like there's a lot of stuff that I've forgotten over the last 10, 12 years, and I'm like, oh yeah, that thing. I had this debate with myself. I had this debate of, am I a bad parent because this thing goes so off the rails and doesn't really have a satisfying conclusion. But I think I've landed on that I'm not, because I think that could be said about a lot of shows. I don't know.
Heroes?
Yeah.
Heroes is a very, very similar example of like that first season of Heroes. By God, that was one of the best. Let's try it again. That's one of the best television watching experiences I've ever had, apart from like Futurama and X-Files.
Oh yeah,
that first season of Heroes really just knocked it out of the park. But it goes south. Like if you
that was the writer's strike. That was
that what caused
that show was the.
Did they just film through not having a script? Because it goes south.
Yeah, you can pinpoint the right when it starts going really terrible is right when the writer's strike happened. Like, Lost was hit with that too, but Lost was also hit with ABC going to the creators after it was a massive success and being like, we're going to do like 7 or 8 seasons. And they're like, we were thinking 4. And they're like, well, we signed your paychecks, so you're going to make a lot more seasons.
I think it's like season 3 and 4, they come in with the others, where there's that other part of the plane that crashed, and they work them in. And if you take those 2 seasons, I think it's 3 and 4. It might be 2 and 3. It's been a long time since I watched it, or 4 and 5. It's been a while. But if you take I didn't hate those 2 seasons. If you take those 2 seasons and you just kind of pick them up and lift them out,
there's almost nothing of consequence because almost everybody dies.
Right. Nothing happened. You didn't. It's completely pointless 2 seasons. But I enjoyed watching it. Well, so I'm not mad about that. I'm not mad about them stretching it out unnecessarily. I feel like they did it well.
In our rewatch, we're like right in the middle of 3, and like what I'm finding is season 2 was like super tight. Season 3 is also really good, but has a lot of filler. Probably because that's when ABC was like, more, make it longer, make more. And
there was that thing, and now this has become a Lost podcast. Let's just go with that. Let's not get to Z. Let's just go with we're now a Lost podcast. But listen, the thing that and it's been a while, and I could be wrong. If I remember correctly, which I probably don't. If I remember correctly, the cute blonde who was kind of into Hurley,
Libby,
who was also on the show Titus as Titus's wife or girlfriend/wife. She had like a really interesting arc that started. And if the information I got, which may have come from the interwebs or possibly George Carney, who was a what do you call that thing?
He was like a production assistant on that show.
Right, yeah, PA on that show. She like got a DUI
with Michelle Rodriguez, right?
Oh, I don't know. And they were mad about that, so they threw her off the show, but they didn't quite close out because like there's that one shot at the end of an episode, possibly at the end of a season, where like you see her in the insane asylum with Hurley.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, this is some shit. And I feel like that never went anywhere.
Well, no, I think they eventually paid that off. Not
did they pay it off?
But I do believe they eventually tied that in.
I don't know. I haven't gone that far yet in the rewatch, but I will say that like there seems to be, as I look into things, there seems to be things that the writers and the creative team like play close to the vest. Sounds like there was characters that they wanted that the island of Hawaii wanted off the island because they were getting in trouble for driving under the influence. But there seems to be conversation of like, oh, we always intended to have this character for only one season, and things like that. With that character that you're talking about, Sean, Libby, like there was a thing that was left dangling and then like really didn't get circled back to. But what I have read, which may or may not be bullshit based on what the writers have said, is that they meant to bring her back and then they got impacted by that writer strike. And then when they tried to fix it a year later, she already was on another show. So
I wonder if it was Titus. If you haven't watched Titus, it was a 2 or 3 season. I'm going to say 3-season sitcom based on the stand-up comedian. This is when they were in that craze of like, you know, that post Seinfeld. Every stand-up comedian that's ever existed needs a sitcom craze that they were doing. But Titus was solid. I really enjoyed the hell out of that show. Had a couple good actors, good writing, panned out well.
Well,
and she was on it.
To get back to how I watched this, we're in the middle of watching Lost. I considered if I'm a bad parent. I don't think I am, because I think that could, you know, shows not paying off can be a lot of shows, and B, like, Nate doesn't really care. Like there's things that end in an unsatisfying way, and he'll be like, okay, so I think it'll be fine. Yeah, so we had just finished that, and it was one of those things of like, do we start something else? And then we were all down there, and I was like, do you guys want to watch this with me? Like, it'll probably be fine for him. It's a 80s show, 80s movie about young Einstein. And everyone was like, all right, let's do it. And then immediately everybody was like, ooh, why'd we do this?
So Nate didn't like it?
Nate did like it, but then, after an hour he had to go to bed. And I was like, are we going to let him stay up, or are you just going to finish it tomorrow? And I was like, all right, you'll just finish it tomorrow. And I was like, well, I need to finish it for the podcast. So I finished it. And then the next day, he's like, so I'm going to finish the movie, right? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch it again. And he was like, yeah, but I need to finish it. And I was like, all right. And I put it on. And then Sherry was like, you're on your own. Got up and walked out of the room. So I watched the last half hour of it twice, unfortunately. And while I watched it, I ate a Vegemite sandwich.
If you actually ate a Vegemite sandwich, I am blown away.
Yeah,
good for you. I don't even know where you would find Vegemite.
I bought some bread from a man from Brussels. He was 6'4" and full of muscles.
Full of muscles.
Yeah. I said, "Are you speaking my language?" And that's the end of the story. No, I didn't eat anything while I watched it.
Went home and made your own Vegemite sandwich.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. As we get into this, I'm just going to make the argument that this is a great movie. I'm gonna reach down deep.
Did you like it, Sean? Because I
no.
All right. Let me get the factoids out of the way, and then we can jump in.
Okay.
All right. Young Einstein was released on August 4th, 1989.
By Satan.
It was distributed by Warner Brothers intentionally. It was written by David Roach and Yahoo Serious, who also directed the film. Roach's other works include Death of a Chook and other Yahoo Serious vehicles, Reckless Kelly and Mr. Accident. Mr. Serious's other films are just Reckless Kelly and Mr. Accident. I can't imagine why. The film stars Yahoo Serious, Udile Leclésio, and John Howard. It tells the story of a young Albert Einstein who uses his love of science and an unlimited supply of apples to carbonate beer.
But it doesn't tell the story of a young... It reimagines the story of Albert Einstein as a Tasmanian apple farmer.
I'd say it tells a story of...
Yeah, I don't think he's from Tasmania.
See, it says that I said it tells the story of a young Albert Einstein. Not necessarily the young
right.
Albert.
Yeah, God, this... So, I'll get this... Jeez. I grew up watching this movie, and I enjoyed it as a child, and we watched it a lot of times. And my little sister watched it even more than I did, and she watched it a gajillion times. And as we watched it this time, after I have not seen it in 15, 20 years, since I was a child probably, I see now how bad a movie it is. If I wanted to say a bunch of positive stuff and say that it's great, here's what I will say I realized about halfway through, and I mentioned this to Kris briefly. I feel like as I was watching it, I was like, oh, this is like Australia's answer to like almost like an Ernest or an Ed Grimley, right? He's zany, right? And just the way he moves, right? So lots of the scenes are pointless and it's just him walking, but he does move in a very cartoonesque or zany fashion, right? So then I'm like, oh, I get it. If you were a child, right, and you loved Pee Wee Herman and Ernest and Mr. Bean and Ed Grimley, if you remember Martin Short's Ed Grimley, that's the one that really kind of stuck a similarity for me. I'm like, oh, I kind of get it. I probably love this as a child the same way I loved Ernest as a child, because he's all over the place. So the boring scenes that really don't do anything, and as an adult, you're like, why did we just watch a scene of this man getting on a boat for 3 minutes? Like, what the hell was that about, director or editor? Why wasn't this like, it didn't establish any? It wasn't an establishing shot. It didn't further the plot. It was just him moving from point A to point B. But he did so with his limbs flailing, and he's good at that. Look, Jim Carrey's good at making faces. It's a physical attribute that he excels at, and I see that. And my assumption is that's why I loved it as a child. As an adult, it doesn't do a whole lot, right? You need that second layer, or as Alec Baldwin say, the third heat coming in to work at the same time. And it didn't have that. It was just that flat. If you think it's funny to watch this man cartoon walk around, then this movie works. But you got to be a child for that, I think. So when you said that Nate didn't seem to be into it, I was like, oh, Jesus. I don't even know where this is going at that point.
Well, and it's one of those things where I don't know if he was legitimately into it or if he wanted to stay up the extra half hour and watch it. It's always hard to read with him. Yeah, I think I saw a lot of the same things that you did, Sean. I did not enjoy the movie. I think it suffered from pacing problems. I think much like you said. I can sort of see why some people might like it though, and like I wonder if we're gonna get like a lot of hate mail from Australia because I think this guy is like like their Marlon Brando, right? Like he's
Oh Jesus, Australia! If this is your Marlon Brando,
he's got 3 movies. I don't think that's the case.
If he's your Ernest or your Mr. Bean, yeah, sure, all right. Look, you're on par.
No, listen, wait, but I want to come back to this thing about Ernest that you said, right? Because I thought the same thing watching it, right? I'm looking at him and I'm like, what happened that screwed your career, buddy? Like, why did you fizzle after this, right? Because I was who came and took that torch of sort of the rubber faced, goofball funny man. I was like, was it Jim Carrey? And I was like, no, like Ace Ventura wasn't till like 93, 94. It wasn't Jim Carrey. And I was like, was it Jim Varney? Was it Ernest? But as I watched the thing and I was comparing him to some of those people that I felt like were like that, the sort of like wacky, physical comedy type people, I'm realizing like those people also have I don't know, like sort of
talent.
Well, sure, that's a good way to put it, Kris. But I'd say sort of the verbal joking component, whether it's the writing or the acting or whatever it is. This guy was so dry, and I think they thought that was a feature of the movie. But like really what it did was it like caused a lot of pacing problems. Like there was scenes where and like the one I'm going to reference, the one that makes me think of it, was when he goes to France to get Marie Curie and then they take the hot air balloon to the Science Academy Awards, right? When he climbs into her window and he's having that dialogue with the dad, he's like, I see you got a hot air balloon parked on the lawn, and like he says these things sort of like this, and it's like, you're playing this part more like John Wayne than Ernest, you know? Like everything was in this sort of like one note, like, "Hey, howdy, Pilgrim" kind of thing. And I
I
was like,
thought the exact same thing. I was thinking John Wayne for that scene. That's. I'm so glad you said that because I thought that exact same thing.
yeah, it was
So
weird.
there's two different things that I think play into what Paul just said. One is Australia is a British colony. That's right. We're going geography, motherfucker. So Australia's a British comedy. I think a lot of their humor tends to mimic the British humor, which doesn't always translate to America well, right? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It's a drier humor. You were just saying drier. And then the other part is it almost felt like if it leaned in a little more, and I don't know if it intentionally was doing what I'm about to say and just didn't do it enough, or if it accidentally almost did it, but it almost did like a Wet Hot American Summer where it was making fun of its own dryness, right? Where it was like so bad that it was making fun of itself, right? Like some of the things he said were almost so stereotypical. Whereas with like Jim Carrey and Ernest, like you said, you said you weren't sure if it was the writing or the acting. I think it's the writing with them, right? So with Ernest and Jim Carrey, and Ernest is still very much a child's movie, but as with most great children's movie, there's some stuff written in there for adults, right? More so nowadays, less so with Ernest, but certainly with the Jim Carrey stuff. Like if you go back and watch The Mask or whatever, some early Jim Carrey stuff, sure, his physical comedy is driving it, is driving the film, and he's very good at that. But there's a second layer there to make it more. It couldn't exist with just his ability to stretch his face. That's not going to carry a whole movie, right? You put some writing underneath it, you give it an actual plot and maybe some real jokes underneath, then his physical comedy, even if it doesn't land every time with the adults, it's just another layer, right? Where this didn't have that. But again, it could be the British dryness of it, right? Or once or twice I was like, do they understand how bad this is? Is this Wet Hot American Summer? Are they mocking themselves? I don't think they were, but I don't know. Maybe I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I don't think they were either, because this whole thing strikes me so much as a vanity project. And it sounded like I was being snarky by saying talent, but I think that I mean that. I think there is a distinct lack of all of the talents that it takes to be what Yahoo Serious was attempting to be with this movie, which was writer, director, and star. And his physical, his ability to move like a cartoon character is one thing, but if you look back at the Ernest movies, which I was never even all that big on as a kid, but at least I could see the appeal. It's extraordinarily stupid, and that man gave himself 100% to that stupidity. And like that was the product. That's what it was, and it worked for what it was. It was functional. The jokes weren't funny. Like they were coming up with these jokes that they were like, yeah, this is good enough. But I feel like so much of the impetus behind this movie was, I'm Yahoo Serious. I am funny enough that no matter what I do, someone's going to look at this and they're going to laugh. And by the time part of me wants to say by the time he got into making this, he realized he was in over his head, but he didn't, because he kept making movies. This wasn't even his first. And I mean, I kept making movies. He made what, 3 or 4? But this whole thing just seems like this guy was like, I'm the brand, and that's all this needs. We don't need to try harder for any of this stuff. We're just going to be like me. I'm Monty Python all on my own. Like, we just need to have people say silly things near silly objects, and then I'm going to do my thing, and that's going to be enough, and I'm going to be huge. And then it failed everywhere in the world except for Australia.
Well, you saying it's a vanity project, that's probably not far off the mark. And again, I think this is a reason why we disliked it, but probably the people of Australia would probably say it's great. Because again, I think this guy was a success story there. Like what, and don't quote me on this. This is me this is me seeing the movie going, how on earth did that happen? And then trying to find some things out about it. So I might be reiterating some things wrong, or maybe, I'll have to follow up and check that I got this right. But it sounds like he started filming this movie a couple years before it was released, like maybe even like 83 or 84, and that he shot an hour of the movie and ran out of money. And then it sounds like some Australian production company came in and tried to save him. That it was like it might have been like Village Roadshow Pictures or something. I think it was like whoever made the Mad Max movies, also an Australian staple. But that they were like, all right, we're gonna help you finish this movie. And then when they did, they were like, we want our money back. This was bad. And then it was some American company that said, no, we think we can help you fix this. And there was things that were reshot, and like somebody saw some kind of potential in it, and there was things that were reshot, and there was things that were I guess redubbed or something like that. Like, part of me wondered if the dad maybe had like a real thick Australian accent that was like impossible to understand, and that they had to have another actor ADR it or something, because every time he talked, I was like, is that guy talking? Like, that doesn't seem like that guy talking.
I didn't even notice that.
I don't know. That was what I thought. But
I could be off on the timing, but I think this was released around that time period. There was like I know I mentioned this the other night to Kris. I feel like I've re-mentioned some stuff because we watched it together, which I think might be a mistake moving forward, unless we're going to record right afterwards. But because then I can't remember what I did and didn't say. There was like a period there for like 2 years where America just loved anything Australian, right? You had the Fosters, you had the Crocodile Dundee movies. Like, America was obsessed with Australia for like, it wasn't very long. It might have been like 12 months, 15 months, something like that. But I think this happened to come, this and his second movie, which came out right on its heels, Reckless Kelly.
His second movie was a couple years later. It was in the early 90s.
What was this, like 89?
This was, I think, 88.
88? All right, so that was like,
Yahoo Serious.
I think 88 to like 91 is right in that sweet spot where you had both Crocodile Dundee movies. You had Foster's Australian for Beer came into this country. And like, I don't know, I feel like for that couple years, anything Australian just got a 10% increase in money. So that's probably why the American company came in and backed this. They were like, oh, you have a movie that's sort of almost suitable for release. We'll sew up the edges and knock it out there. It'll be fine.
Yeah, Dundee was 86. This was 88. And then Reckless Kelly, his second movie, was 93.
93.
And
all
then
right.
Mr. Accident was 2000.
Yeah, I knew his other one was way later. I don't know how that one got.
Well, I want to respond to something you said, Sean, about the dry humor and the British thing. What like that? I think I was thinking something along similar lines, right? Because when I'm watching it and I'm like, oh God, why isn't this working? Like at one point here, I'm looking at where's my notes? At one point I wrote something. I was writing notes for a while, and then at a certain point I just started writing crazy things that Nate was saying about the movie, which shows you what I thought of it. But at one point I wrote, this was almost a movie. And I think what I meant by that was at one point I'm like, why isn't this working? And I kind of was, I think, trying to compare it to like parody movies, of which this was not. This movie was not a parody, but like I look at stuff I don't know, any Mel Brooks stuff, because that was sort of right in this time period. I mean, like I guess more the height of Mel Brooks was more like the late 70s with like Blazing Saddles and Producers and stuff like that. But certainly
he was still making stuff into the early 90s.
Oh, into the 90s, yeah. And certainly
yeah.
Spaceballs was probably around this time.
Sure.
So I think of Mel Brooks stuff. I think of some of the other parody stuff that preceded this, like like Airplane and Top Secret, or even stuff in the 90s or early 2000s like Scary Movie and Not Another Teen Movie and stuff like that. Like they have the license to make visual jokes, make meta jokes, like certainly like Mel Brooks does all the stuff where it's like, oh, the Cowboys break through the back lot and they like ride onto other movie sets, or like Spaceballs has that thing where it's like, where are we in the movie? We're right here, and they're rewinding and fast forwarding and stuff like that, like there's weird jokes, there's self-referential jokes, stuff like that. And this movie had some weird sort of like almost like parody looking jokes, right? Like here's a couple I wrote down. Like
when he says, "If you can't trust the governments of the world, who can you trust?" And then they all look at the camera.
Yeah, that. There's some of the ones I wrote down. The dad is talking about taking up the granddad's hobby, and they kind of walk past the granddad's tombstone, and it's like, here lies granddad, blah blah blah. Another thing was in the institution, in the asylum, there was one guy that had a axe that it didn't even look like a fireman axe. It looked like a weird little like battle axe, and then he used it to break glass and get out an identical axe that was like the same. Like there was all these weird moments like this that I feel like you find in sort of a parody movie, but like A, it wasn't a parody, and B, like it almost felt like the style of it was trying to be in the style of something else that was like previously written or existed. Like the thing I thought about, and it's interesting because Sean said British humor, is the thing I thought about was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like there's stuff when you read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that is like funny on paper, like funny imagery, like he says, the one I always think of is, he says something like, the spaceships hung in the air kind of the way that bricks don't, and I'm like, oh, that's like a really funny line, but like, how the hell do you put that on screen? Like, how do you show that in a movie, So like, when they made that Hitchhiker's Guide movie, it was like not really the same because like they had to do humor that was like similar to the style, but like wasn't exactly what's written in the book always, So like this made me feel the same way, that it was trying to create some kind of style that was based on something.
So you brought up that axe shot, right?
Yeah.
And there was 5 or 6 times during the movie as we sat there and watched it where I pointed out to Kris and Greg, because Greg was with us when we watched it, and Karen. I pointed out, I was like, "That's funny, right?" So we're
like
all
5 or 6 is being generous. The only other one I remember was the sheep.
Right. So the sheep. I feel like there was a handful more. There was a handful of times. The axe was one of them. When I felt like we were sitting there in this slog, in this just wretch of a movie viewing experience, right? Where you're like, this is not good. This is not how you should make a movie. We could do better than this, and we shouldn't be making a movie, right? And you're like, this is just bad. And I feel like there was a handful of jokes, not that they were amazing, not that they were like write home about it, but they were solid gags, and a lot of them were semi-visual, which made me think that there was somebody with a solid sense of humor involved, but not in charge. Because Kris just pointed out, there was one shot in the beginning where he's like, I don't remember, they're in the house, and like it's almost subtle. It's almost a throwaway joke. They're talking. It's like the Einstein and his parents, and the mom is like knitting right off the sheep. Like her string goes back to the sheep, and the sheep's half naked.
Wait.
I was like,
is this the scene where the sheep says goodnight to him, and then
yes,
he says goodnight to his dad, and then he motorboats his mom goodnight? Because that was weird. That was so weird.
Right. So it's a weird scene. And all those jokes didn't. When you say them, they're funnier. It's almost that Hitchhikers thing. You saying them is kind of funny. Watching it happen wasn't funny, except for the joke that they didn't do. The joke with the mom, I mean, they did it, but they didn't say it. It wasn't a verbal thing. It was just while that scene is happening, she's knitting, and if you follow the string back, it's coming right off the sheep who's now half naked, right? And I'm like, that's kind of funny, and I pointed that out. And then like later, he's in his he rented that terrible room that was full of cockroaches or whatever, and like there's this one shot he's about to do whatever he's about to do that has to do with the plot, so let's not talk about it. But there's like this comically high stack of dishes in the background, and I pointed that out too, as like he gets blown out the window from like, I don't remember what he did, touches his electronic violin to the bathtub or whatever, but like in the back corner there's this comically large pile of dishes, and I pointed out, I was like, that's kind of funny. And then the axe thing was kind of funny. There was a handful of things like that I feel like they weren't written in the script. I don't think it was part of the whoever was in charge of the script. I think it was more like somebody working on the movie had a real good sense of humor and was like, I don't know that this movie's funny. Let me put in some background visual gags. Like, what if the mom is sewing from the sheep? What if there's a ridiculous stack of plates? What if the guy has to get an axe? Because there's no verbiage when that guy's getting that axe. And I did think that was funny. You're right. He comes up with a battle axe to break the glass in case of emergency to get another axe that looks like the one he just had. Look, is it comedy gold? No. Is it a solid effort? Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I appreciate it. You know, like, yeah, right, it's funny.
There was one part of the movie where I laughed out loud. There was one joke where I audibly laughed, where I couldn't stop myself from laughing, and I laughed. And I'm going to tell you the joke, but then I want to tell you everything that you had to go to get to that joke. So you let me know if this joke pays off, right?
Was it the woman? Because the woman at the end, the woman who screams and Mary Curie has to like elbow her because she's out of control, like having a fan moment. That was kind of funny too. That's one of those 5 or 6 funny moments where I was like, that's a good joke.
The one thing that I laughed at was when Mary Curie goes into the, we're saying Mary Curie because that's how they pronounced it in the movie. Marie Curie goes into the asylum to talk to him, and she's dressed in drag and saying that she's his dad, and that they make out in that shower room, and then those two guys go, oh yeah, close family. Right? Like, that was the one time I laughed. Let's go through what needed to happen for that joke to happen, right? First, he needed to try to get his patent with that Bavarian beer company. They had to have him committed. Then we had to go into the institution, and he's talking to all those other, mad scientists, the mad scientist ward or whatever. Then Marie Curie had to find out that he was in the institution. Then she goes to knock on the door to get in there, and you have that guy who's the doorkeeper, where it's almost like a Wizard of Oz thing, like not nobody get in to see the great wizard. I know, like, he's even sort of talking fast like that, right? And first he says, you can't talk to him. He's bathing. He's taking a bath. And she goes, I'll wait however long it takes. And he goes, he'll be in there a long time. I don't know that was supposed to be funny then, but as I think, maybe you're supposed to watch the movie twice. I don't know. As I think about it, he was in that shower a long goddamn time, right? Because like then they had to show him in the shower. And, all those gratuitous butts that we didn't need to see, right?
And we did see him in bathtubs a lot through this movie. On, like, at least 3 or 4 different... There was the part where he's, like, washing the dishes while he's sitting in the bathtub out front of his parents' house. Then there's the part where he's in the bathtub with the electric violin. Then there's the part you're talking about. So he's in the bath at least 3 or 4 times.
Let me get back to the part with the electric violin, because I have something to say about that. But yeah, and then so Marie Curie's like, I want to get in, and they go through this whole thing about he's bathing, and he'll be bathing for a long time, and then when they find out she's not going to leave, then they go, you can't get in because you're not family, and then she's like, so his father, could get in, and they say yes. And that's when she goes away to come back to be the father. And then I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, why on earth didn't she just say she's his sister? Why would she say that she's his father? And then I realize that they won't do that because then they wouldn't let her into the shower. That she needed to be a man to get in and see him in the shower, that he was taking a shower for a long time. Then that sort of trans or
butch nurse.
But yeah,
was that a man? That was a man in drag.
It was a man in drag. Lets her into,
which almost looked Monty Python in nature the way they did it.
Yeah, it's hard.
Right?
It's hard to know why that was a thing. And they let her into the shower, and then they kiss, and then they make the joke of like, close family. And I was like, I laughed. But all that logic we took to get there, was it worth it? Was it worth
and
it?
that
for
guy,
that
guy who made that joke, and I'm not 100% sure if it's him or not. That guy who made that joke about close family, right? One of the mad scientists who had a very bit role. He reminded me so much of the guy from the movie Dead Alive, which was like a New Zealand zombie movie that I made everybody watch. Remember that one? Something about the way he said it, and even kind of the way he looked. I think he might have been the other boyfriend, not the main guy, the main girl's boyfriend before she leaves the boyfriend to go to the main guy in Dead Alive. I think that might have been him. They were both. This movie was filmed in Australia, New Zealand, something like that, right?
Yeah, Australia.
All right, Dead Alive was filmed in one of the. I don't know if Dead Alive was. I get those two confused.
That was
New Zealand or Australia.
Dead Alive was filmed in New Zealand because it was Peter Jackson, and much of Peter Jackson's stuff is filmed in New Zealand.
All right, that's still, even though I know that's technically a different country. I'm betting it's got a lot of the same backup actors through those.
You said the thing about him in the bath with the violin. At some point I stopped taking notes and I just wrote down weird stuff my family said because one thing that happened towards the beginning of the movie, like right before he split the beer at him, like there was all the stuff about the beer and getting bubbles in the beer, which like it was weird that his dad was like, oh, you got to get the bubbles in the beer, and then and then when he does it, like all of a sudden his dad's like they didn't even know what beer was, and all of a sudden his dad's like like an experienced beer drinker. His dad's like, oh, look at the head on that. But anyway, he's like. He's working in that shack, and it's like you're seeing the sun coming up on the shack, and like Sherry, like it was a long shot of just this shack, and Sherry goes, "Is the movie frozen?" Right? like she thought like we were hearing the thing, but the picture wasn't changing, and I was like, "No, that shack's gonna blow up," and then it did. It blew up.
There's something about that shot that you knew that shack was going to blow up. And I'm not exactly sure how they did that. I don't know if that's really good or really bad filmmaking. But like as soon as you saw that shot, you're like, this shack's going to blow up.
Nate made a couple weird comments. Some of them I wrote down are indecipherable. But the one was about him in the bathtub playing the electric violin. Like Nate sees that scene and he just goes, "Dude, you're going to die." I'm gonna write that down.
I didn't. This movie. Let me tell you why this movie's great. This movie made me think for the first time, just this time when I watched it, I was like, "Holy crap! I never thought of that. When did bubbles get into beer? Beer goes back to the ancient Egyptians." But that's not where the bubbles come from. They were just drinking flat beer for thousands and thousands of years. In like the 800s and 900s, like people drank beer because the water would kill you. People didn't drink water. That was a surefire way to die because it wasn't clean. They didn't understand that making the beer out of the water, that the part that was important was boiling the water. That's what was killing all the bacteria and made it safe to drink. So they were just drinking beer. Granted, very low alcohol content beer, but for thousands of years, more beer was drunk than water was drunk because water would kill you and beer was nutritious and kept you alive. So literally thousands and thousands of years. And then this movie made, like, I just never stopped to think about it. I was like, oh yeah, there was no bubbles in that beer. That's like a process. And of course, it has nothing to do with splitting the atom. But if nothing else, it made me look up like how long ago. It was the early 1800s. In the early 1800s, they came up with the science to add bubbles to beer. So for all our listeners who didn't know that, now you do. It's like 1830s.
Why? Why does beer need the bubbles?
You know what? I don't know why they knew that it did. Like, what genius, soothsayer, prophet figured that out. But for all the beer drinkers that listen, like, a flat beer is, I mean, maybe I'm only saying it comparatively because I've had not flat beer, but flat beer is awful. It's like, this is terrible. Like, if you hand me a flat beer, I'm going to be like, the hell is this shit?
It's fascinating to me, like, on so many ways, how so many various things came to be. Like, who drank beer and said, you know what this needs? Bubbles.
Like, it's a great question. And now I kind of want, like, I say prophet, soothsayer, you know, jokingly, but at the same time, I'm like, exactly what you said.
Who looked at a cow and said, I'm going to drink that? Like,
well, that brings us to a whole nother conversation. I often wonder that, like, who picked up an almond, ate it, was like, yes, and then picked up an eggcorn and ate it and was like, no. Like, I don't, like, who went through everything, right? Because there's not a nickel's difference.
Or coffee, right? Like, who took
how
the
did
beans
we get to
that
coffee?
came out of the poop of this thing, you know, whatever, and crushed it all up and poured hot water
Boiled
over
it.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
why would you think to do
questions.
that? Why would you do that?
There's no reason. There's no reason. Thank God they did. Thank God they did.
Yeah. Well, see, there you
yeah,
go.
like, I'm glad they did, like, cheese in general. I'm glad they did it, but, like, how did we get here?
I think I would have killed myself 20, 30 years ago if not for coffee. I mean, just like, I can't imagine waking up on like a Tuesday and being like, yep, I did Monday. We're going to do 3 more days of this bullshit without a cup of coffee. I don't think that would happen. I mean, I love beer and all, but I think coffee might be absolutely quintessential. That's the one that keeps me going, I think.
I think I need more vices in my life because I don't drink coffee or alcohol.
I could do without the alcohol. I think the caffeine had really, really stopped me.
Well, see, there you go. This movie was super educational.
See that? You know, it made you think. This movie made you think about a lot of things that you didn't want to think about.
Like, what am I doing with my life?
You notice how they kept mixing in weird science that didn't have to do with Einstein? Like, I feel like Einstein did a bunch of stuff and they touched on some of it. And then they were like, remember that whole thing with Newton and the apple? What if we vaguely allude to it and then don't follow up with that shit?
Well, that's why I was so confused at the
right?
beginning of the movie, because everything he was doing at the beginning of the movie was Newton. Like it says, you know, on an apple farm in Tasmania, and I'm like, what? You know, and they do the him under the apple tree in the beginning of the movie, and he's listening to music, and the apple falls on his head. And then like a scene later, there's the thing with the, like, he and the dad are out there, and the dad is like shaking this shovel that's been chomped. There's a big like chomp mark out of it.
Oh,
I
forgot all about that whole scene.
This Tasmanian devil that kind of looks like if like Grimace had a baby with like HR Puff and stuff. Like, it was.
He looked like the gremlins from that Mystery Science Theater episode.
Oh, hobgoblins.
Hobgoblins.
Yeah, it looked like a giant hobgoblin.
And you know what? I think as a child, I thought that's what a Tasmanian devil was. You hear the name, you know, you see Taz from like Tiny Toons or Looney Tunes, you know, if you want to go, whatever. And then like this movie showed that, and then I think in my head I was just like, I guess that's what a Tasmanian devil is.
Which again, like maybe this movie is super funny to Australians, right? Like, maybe that's a joke for Australians because they know what Tasmanian devils look like, and then
I'm looking it up now, but I'm pretty sure a Tasmanian devil is basically like a a tiger, right? That's some sort of cat.
Yeah, I think it's more like the size of a cat. Like I don't, I think it's maybe like a size of a small dog or something. But yeah, I'm like,
Oh, he's cute.
is this a joke? Is this a joke where we're seeing this goofy, ridiculous thing because they're trying to show what the rest of the world like thinks a Tasmanian devil looks like? Like
That's what I'm saying. It's got to be that. I think Tasmanians know, and I'm betting Australians and New Guineans. New Guineans? I don't know, whatever they call themselves, New Guinea eyes. I think they probably know what a Tasmanian devil is, and I think it's. And I've looked up a picture just now. I think it's basically like some sort of like cat rodent-y thing. It's certainly not whatever the hell they showed us, right? And so that feels like a joke for the rest of the. Maybe it's a joke for. I don't know. It's not funny, so it's hard to figure out who the joke is for.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, who would find that funny? Someone who doesn't understand how wrong it is, or someone who does? And I don't.
But yeah, there was the bit with the apple falling from the tree. Then there was the bit with him falling on the seesaw, and the crate of apples falls on him. And then he does another thing where he like slingshots himself into the air, and then he falls.
Which again, I think he's saying Newton's principles.
Yeah, and then the mom's just like, yeah, what goes up comes down, and like I think it was just so that he could have a bunch of science theories to say and prove, but it felt so weird because it started with all the Newton stuff. It was called Young Einstein. It claimed to be about Einstein, but then he's a Tasmanian apple farmer, and then I 10, 15 minutes in, I'm like, what is the joke? Like, is the joke that Einstein is Austrian and they're making him Australian? I'm like, what is the joke? I couldn't figure it out. But yeah. I think people in Australia would say that it's fine. Like, I think there's a lot of people that like this movie, probably because of all the weird, quirky things that we're explaining. And then, I don't know, I think also, like, some of it played like an 80s music video, which I think there's people that have some sort of nostalgia spot for. I think there are people that like this.
So 2 things about that. 1, there were multiple travel montages where nothing happened and we just saw him to 80s music. And then 2, within 10 minutes of the close of this movie, I had gone online and purchased the vinyl edition of the Young Einstein soundtrack. So that's something positive to be said for that.
See, so like this is what I'm saying. We're bashing this movie, but obviously it like hit you on some level. Like there are.
Well, it's not that it didn't have any redeeming qualities. Like the soundtrack was okay, but by and large, it failed in nearly every way a movie could fail. It was a miserable viewing experience from top to bottom, with the exception of the fun we were having watching it being miserable together.
There was a lot of Greg saying, like, thank God it's a commercial,
Mm-hmm. There was we had fun. We had a good time watching it, but
yeah, and
not because of the movie itself, which I just think was absolutely abysmal.
We had a good time watching it because we had drank a lot of curdled alcohol for most of us.
And I watched it the same night as you, probably starting it an hour before you all did. So I think the good folks at Tubi were like...
You were ahead of us.
They were like, 2 people watching it? This is great! There's 2 people watching Young Einstein.
You watched it in Philadelphia. That's in a different time zone, so we actually watched it at the same time.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm on Rotten Tomatoes right now, which this has a 36% score. Seems and generous. A 50% audience score, which is wild. With 10,000 plus ratings.
There was a lot of
the ones. Oh. What I thought was interesting is the movies that they say you might also like. I've heard of exactly one of them.
What's that you've heard of?
Airborne, Spotswood, 4 for Texas, The Heavenly Kid, and Ernest Rides Again. So I've heard of the Ernest movie.
Oh.
Sure.
I'm unfamiliar with all the rest of these.
As am I, but Ernest only confirms what I said earlier. This is kind of like, I think Yahoo Serious might be Australia's answer to Ernest.
And Ernest Rides
and
Again is probably one of the worst Ernest movies.
Yeah, that
Ernest
one has
goes
a
to jail or Ernest
14%.
Halloween. Those are the two you want to go with, right?
That's a 14 on the. These other movies they recommend are all horrible. Spotswood is a 67% fresh.
What's fresh?
It means it's good, not rotten.
Oh.
But all the rest of them is like Airborne is 27, Four for Texas is 11, Ernest Rides Again is 14, and The Heavenly Kid is 30.
Yeah, so I'm not sitting here saying I love Ernest movies, not at all. But they are what they are, and they do a good job of being what they were trying to do. So, Ernest came out there every time, and he gave it his all, and he made the movie he was trying to make. And while it's certainly generally targeted at children, it's. I'm not going to sit here and trash Ernest movies. Right?
I love Ernest movies. I love them.
That's fine. That's fine. That man went out there with a specific plan and he executed it well, right? I don't want us to do an Ernest marathon. Please don't anybody make us do that, because I'll do it, but I'm only going to be sad about it, right? But I'm not talking trash on it. Ernest is fine, and I think this is Australia's answer to Ernest.
This is so stupid. I don't know why I do this. I have no idea why, right? But in Ernest Scares Stupid, there's this part of the movie where the trolls are allergic to milk, or
Miak?
Yeah.
Miak? I can never not think of Miak. I don't know why that scene sticks in my head. We're the same person.
I know.
But that scene is stuck in my head for the last 30 years. You didn't think I could find fresh Miak, did you? I say that all the time. I usually tack in the word bitch, and I'm sure that wasn't there, but I'm like, I say that anytime I can sort of work. You didn't think I could find fresh Miak, did you, bitch?
Oh my God, Sean, I love you. I will come upstairs. Like, we'll be getting cookies or brownies or something. I'll come upstairs and I'll be like, pour myself a glass of fresh Miak, and Sherry will be like, "Why do you do this?
What are you talking about?" And then you have a choice. You could either tell her you are mentally damaged, or you're quoting Ernest. And for the health of your marriage, I'm going to say go with the prior, right? I mean,
oh man.
So I'm enjoying these. The reviews on Rotten Tomatoes for this movie are fascinating. We've got one for 4 stars that says a hysterical take on alternate history that takes you on a wild ride, laughing the whole time. Would recommend this to anyone looking for a good, quote, serious film to watch.
that was written by Yahoo Serious.
Clearly. Then we've got this 2-star rating here. This is a very generous rating, and I'm only giving it this due to the nostalgia, as this was only the second time having seen it since it came out way back in '88. In this movie, you have a young Albert Einstein, hence the name, but he's an Aussie who discovers his theory of relativity through beer making. Yeah, not only that, he invents rock and roll music and surfing. It's definitely not to be taken seriously, as this was no better than just some silly kids movie.
I do also have to say that, again, I didn't expect to be so bored about a movie about somebody that invents beer and rock and roll. But then I also think that, like Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry would probably be rolling over in their graves if they knew that there was a movie that posits that a white Australian guy invented rock and roll.
You think Einstein's happy about this shit? I don't think he is. I mean, that guy seemed like he had a good sense of humor. He was pretty laid back from the little bit I know, but I don't think this is gonna.
I thought it was bonkers that they ended the movie with a real live quote from Albert Einstein. They dedicated the movie to him and then ended it with a quote, as if to say, like, "Here's
we did this out of
stamp of
respect
approval."
for you."
Tomorrow morning, after my cup of coffee, I'm gonna take a large shit in the toilet, and when I do, I'm gonna dedicate that to Paul Giroux. Are you honored? Or are you seriously offended?
I might come over and see your shit, and then
Make the call.
and then sing a song to it at the end, as if the whole movie had been a musical.
Utterly fascinating.
It was bizarre.
Yeah.
I wrote down a couple of these. There were so many of these like music montage, these that like they really felt like 80s music videos, like when he's trekking across Australia.
Yeah.
Which, like, you know, like, good for them. Like, they had all that the production value of the mountains and the deserts and stuff. Like, it looked beautiful.
It did a little time lapse thing there. Yeah, I know it was high end for the time.
Yeah, that felt like a music video. There was one when he went to the patent office. There was one when he was like thinking
on a boat
of rock and
going
roll.
to
Oh yeah, and then him and her on the beach. The I guess the surfing and the beach thing, which like that scene like looked and felt great, but it was one of those things where like you're looking at one moment disassociated from the rest of a movie that didn't work. You know what I mean? Like I looked at that one scene and I was like, she's doing a great job, you know. Like, this looks great.
Yeah, but... you know what, that's the kind of thing we don't see a lot in movies anymore. Are kind of these, I'm gonna call them nonsense. These nonsense like montage falling in love dating scenes that were big in like the late 70s, early 80s, even into the late 80s, where they it didn't further the plot, but I guess it established what they were trying to establish for you real quick in a upbeat and music oriented way, right? Where like a lot of movies would have these little we're falling in love montages. So when you said that kind of worked, you're right. They did that effectively for what the time period did with that. And that was kind of a trope at the time, which would be really interesting if they were making fun of, but I don't think they were. So I'm not going to fault them for it. I'm not impressed by it, but I'm not going to fault them for it. It was kind of the standard, 1980s movie. We're halfway through. We need to establish that the guy and the girl are in love. So here we go. Like we set up the basics in the beginning, and now here's this montage to say that, yep, they fell in love, and then we'll move on from there. So it's, I don't know.
Well, you know what it was about it? We kind of talked about this a little bit last time. I guess last time we recorded it was Fast X, but the time before that, when I think in the beginning we were sort of talking about Guardians 3, Kris was talking about the musical moments, or the music bits in these movies, and lots of movies have music in it, but not all movies integrate the music in an interesting storytelling type way, and sometimes it's just music in a montage, but like there are certain directors that really integrate it well. I think I'm told that like Scorsese's like picks all the music for a movie before he even starts filming, and obviously you watch stuff that James Gunn directs and you're like, yeah, like music obviously plays a big role in like how you shape things. And like in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, like Kris is right, like the arrow, the scene, and the Cat Stevens song at the end, like that music is so well integrated into the storytelling there. Whereas, like, yeah, some of the stuff in 3 just felt like a cool moment, So, like, whatever you want to say, whether it's storytelling or a cool moment, like, some directors use it really well. I think there's people that have a soft spot for this movie because of the soundtrack and, them being Australian bands and, kind of the musical flavor and feel to it. But a lot of those montage felt like music videos, even in the way they were shot and edited, whereas that, the beach one was the only one that really felt like good music storytelling in the movie. You know what I mean?
Right. No, it was an effective scene. I did really like the soundtrack. I mean, I haven't sat and listened to it straight through, But I remember watching it, thinking to myself, "Oh, this is a solid soundtrack. This is each one of these songs sounds like something that I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of the songs. I don't know if it was or not because I haven't sat and watched it, or sat and looked it up. But I did buy the soundtrack, but it's not here yet. The one song sounded like Talking Heads, and one song sounded like Men in Hats, and I was like, oh, this might be good.
Yeah, I found the few musical scenes that were like very, even the score was very 80s movie, which I don't know, fills me with a sort of nostalgic calmness that I like. So I guess for by and large the way this movie sounded, not every song was a hit. When he's performing at the end, that was awful. But when they were using actual music, like original recordings and stuff, there were these brief reprieves of like, okay, this is a thing that I can tolerate because I can tolerate whatever stupidness is happening on screen because the music isn't terrible. So that's nice. That's the best I got. I don't know. This movie made me sad, and it also made me sad that Mystery Science Theater never did it because I feel like this is prime material for some proper riffing. We were having a pretty good time with it too, but yeah, I would love to see Mystery Science Theater tackle this movie.
That might be the best use of this film moving forward. So I'm gonna go ahead and sadly, because again, I have positive nostalgic feeling. I love this movie as a child. I remember having positive feelings. I remember recording it on VHS off TV and thinking, "Thank God, got it, nailed it down. I own it now." On VHS. I remember my little sister sitting in front of the TV, hitting record on like a cassette tape player to record the music out of the movie, because that's how we used to do in the way back times. And I remember thinking, oh, good work, Catherine. I'm going to make a copy of that tape, and now we'll have that. But yeah, it's on the watch. It's just a bad movie.
Now that you've said some of that, Sean, because I think you said this when we picked the movie. I think you're right. I think there was a trailer for this at the beginning of the VHS for Turtles or something. Something that I watched a lot. Maybe it was Bill and Ted. I don't know. But yeah, I think I probably saw this trailer on a VHS, which is why I felt like I saw it all the time and was like, who the fuck is Yahoo Serious? Who is this guy? What is this?
Yeah, I remember the trailer. I'm sure it was on the beginning of one of our VHSs, and I'm trying to think of the right time period, and Turtles is the one that's jumping out at me.
It definitely wasn't Turtles.
No?
If it was, then I would have known this movie, and I don't.
Yeah, because Turtles was 90.
I play right field. It's important, you know. You gotta know how to catch. You gotta know how to throw. That's why I play in right field. Way out where the dandelions grow.
Pizza Hut supports I don't remember, whoever the heck. Yeah. Yeah, me too. I'm with you.
Yeah, it was.
But it had to be something in that time period.
Yeah, it had to be something in that time period. I'm trying to look up
But Turtles was 90, and
yeah, Turtles was 90.
Turtles 2, I think, was like 92 or 93 or something.
Let's see, if this movie was 88, then it must have come out.
I think it
must have come out on VHS.
I mean, could it have been like Bill and Ted or like Batman or something? Something that was 89.
I didn't have Bill and Ted on VHS, so it ain't that. I did, but I had
the shit out of that.
Yeah, but we had we recorded it off like whatever HBO or Cinemax or whatever. So that ain't it. We did have a store-bought copy of Batman '89, the Michael Keaton, but that seems like a weird movie to advertise at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't think this was on there.
Could it have been something that was made in like 86 or something, and then the
86? What are you talking about?
No,
this
like
movie didn't come out till 88.
But this is what I'm saying, right? Like, could it have been something like Last Crusade, where it's like that came out and then maybe the VHS came out a year later, and then it's advertising for a movie that's gonna come out you know,
coming
I don't
soon
know.
to
Do you know
theaters.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, because they would put coming
Yeah.
attractions for not just VHS coming out, but theaters. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to. I'm surprised that there isn't some sort of
Website devoted to
website
this.
devoted to this.
There's a website devoted to everything.
I'm sure if you search the deep, dark recesses of the internet, there's some weirdos that have tracked this.
Is it us? Is this the next project we have to put forth?
Yeah.
Is this what goes up on Geekade? Geekade just becomes a what trailers were on what movies website?
Could be. I wrote down 2 more scenes to talk about.
Go ahead. You
Wow. Yeah,
psychopath.
go for
Well,
it. I'm
one
I'm
of them
done.
is where he goes to the college to talk to Marie Curie, and there's the guy that won't I
Let
guess
him bring the violin in.
yeah, well, he charges him. Well, first there was a guy bringing sheep in for a
Sheep class.
sheep class or something,
Herding class or something. Yeah, yeah. I remember
and then
what you're talking
they
about.
try to pay that joke off later because then like one of the sheep gets kicked out, and it's like you failed, like that sheep failed. But then they charged him to go into the school. Also, the guy standing outside the school was wearing like a graduation cap and gown, like as if to be like college. like, this is college.
College.
You know?
You know,
Yeah.
college.
And then they would, no musical instruments. He had that sign. So again, I'm like, what are all these jokes? Like, are we making fun of Australian colleges? Are we saying that like people, like sort of like bush people in the Australian outback are stupid, and this is like a sort of goober approach to like higher education? Like, what was that?
What was the joke here?
Yeah, what was that?
I don't know. Maybe that's the kind of the moral of the story here is what was the joke here? And the fact that we can't answer it either means we're just not elevated enough to understand this movie as it was meant to be, or it's a shit movie with no meaning, and we should all just move on with our lives.
See, I'm going choice B. I'm never the one to assume that I'm the smartest guy in the room. I always assume that something else around me, there's got to be something that I'm not getting. Like, I always assume that. In this situation, I just think that Yahoo Serious thought he was this cool.
Yeah, it's not good.
The other scene I wrote down to talk about was I mean, it wasn't the end, but it was near the end when they go to the Science Academy Awards, which like there was that whole thing with the hot air balloon, where they fly the hot air balloon into the city, then he pulls the plug on the hot air balloon and it like deflates like a balloon, which like again,
But they clearly ran out of money, so they couldn't show you an animation. So they just had everybody's heads jerk from left to right and made a funny noise. We all knew what happened, and like you might even have a visual in your head, but they never actually showed it. They were just like, you know what a deflating balloon looks like, so like it's zipping around. You get it.
Well,
you get it.
There's like three or four things about that scene. Yeah, like that's another thing where that was a moment that played like a parody in a movie where not everything played like a parody, right? Like where you've got a hot air balloon deflating, right? Like funny idea, weird in the execution, right? And then
That's one of the things that made me think of Wet Hot American Summer. It made me think of that scene with, oh my God, he's doing it. He's actually doing it. He's got the, oh, geez, he's got the, right? Like, it was everybody just looking and pretending like something was happening. It was brilliant.
Yeah. Well, and when you see the hot air balloon, it's kind of red on the bottom, and then it's got like a blue stripe, and then it's got like a white kind of design in the middle. So it looks like that when he's flying it. It looks like that when he's landing it. And then he pulls that plug. We imagine that we've seen it deflate and zip around like a balloon that just lost all its air. And then when it crashes to the ground, it is a different balloon. It is like green and yellow. So then I'm like, is this an instance where they ran out of money? Is this an instance where they ran out of money? Is this an instance where this was the best they could do? Is this an instance where it's trying to be funny because it's a different balloon? Or is this a thing where they just thought no one would notice? Like, when the movie is that disjointed, like, what is the choice? Like, what am I seeing? You know? Yeah, and then I wrote down stuff about that Science Academy Awards, because, like, that was, like, there was all those science, let's not call them science folks, let's call them people, how about persons of historical significance. Personages of historical significance. So you had Marconi, who was like the radio host, and then you had Edison, that, like, he's like, Edison's here with his light bulbs, like, as if that's a new thing. Whereas
Darwin was like hosting.
But, like, also, like, electricity was everywhere in this movie. Like, there was, like, electric locks in the facility, you know, in the, like, insane asylum. Like, you know, like, Edison did not just invent the light bulb in this movie. Yeah, and then there was the Wright brothers, who had like a weird American accent, like overly Americanized American accent. And one of them was a black guy. Like, it was a black guy and a white guy that were the Wright brothers. And then there was a guy that was Freud with his mother, who told him not to pick his nose. So, like, it felt like they were, like, lampooning all these characters, but, like, they were lampooning, like, the real people, whereas it was this, like, alternate history of Albert Einstein. So, like when the movie starts, and you're like, what is happening? And is this supposed to be Einstein? And did Einstein meet Marie Curie? And, like, you know what I mean? Like, you start trying to, like, understand what you're watching. If the whole movie had been peppered with these cameos of people, it might have felt more like a thing. But, like, because they were just all at this like award ceremony at the end, it was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, are these jokes or not? You know?
Yeah, God, if I had an answer for you, then Yahoo Serious might not be on the edge of a cliff right now, about to jump off. To call them jokes is generous. To call them things that happened is accurate. Anything else is speculation.
I mean, did anybody say anything funny in that scene? It was a long scene.
It was, and they kept doing that. You're right. They ran that, again, I'm going to, in quotes, call it a joke, off the edge of the earth, but it didn't always feel like a joke. It didn't always feel funny. It was just like, all right, you got an old guy with a beard playing Darwin. That, I don't know, that, as far as I know, that sounds right. I don't know. He probably had a beard, right? I don't know. Right? Maybe.
I think some, like, again, I think some of them, I think they were supposed to be jokes. Like, I think it was the same thing we're talking about, this weird underlying dry Britishish type humor. You know, there was the thing with Freud and the mom, like, stop picking your nose. And then I think the fact that the Wright brothers, like, had these overly American accents, like, that was supposed to be funny. Darwin was walking around with a beagle, and it said The Beagle, and I think that's the name of the ship that Darwin sailed on when he studied stuff.
I'm pretty sure you're right.
Like when he went to the Galapagos or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, like, that's not funny unless you know that. It might not even be funny if you do know that. But, like,
I do know that, and I still don't think it's funny. Like, I got where they were going. I don't know. Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's why I don't say that this movie's too smart for us. It's like, no, I get what you think the joke is, but it's not funny.
I just don't think that's a joke.
Yeah, that's not a joke. That's just...
I mean, by all
I hate this
accounts,
movie.
it should have been just like an all-out amazing ending, right? Like this like science party that he gets to with all these joke people of historical significance, and that he then has to avoid an assassination attempt and like play
Defuse a
the
nuclear
electric
bomb.
guitar to defuse the bomb. And then it all ends in some tasteful blackface. Like,
I was gonna say he did blackface at least 2 or 3 times in this movie, and I think everybody just let it go. Everyone was just like, "That's the least offensive thing that's happened in the last hour and a half." So, fuck it, right? I mean,
Where are our
just-
standards anymore? Like, I don't know what left, black is white, up is down, left is right. I don't know what's right and wrong anymore.
cats and dogs living together?
Lost my moral compass from watching
It's
this movie.
anarchy.
It did feel more like a movie that happened to us than something we intentionally watched and enjoyed. But it's over now. I'm glad it's over. Are we done talking about it now?
Sweet baby Moses. Yes, I am.
the only other thing I wrote down was that they played Waltzing Matilda more than a few times. I think it's because it's in the public domain, so it's like Waltzing Matilda, we don't have to pay for the song.
I didn't notice that, but that all checks.
It's like some kind of like Australian anthem, right? Like,
Beats me.
Yeah, it all checks out.
do you remember we had to like learn that in like elementary school, like music class?
Yeah, I remember this song. I don't remember it being an Australian thing. But then again, I don't remember much about grade school.
It's an Australian song because they sing something like, "Where's the jolly jumbuck that you've got in your tupper bag?" And we're like, what do those words mean? And they're like, oh, like a jumbuck is a kangaroo and a tupper bag is a backpack. And you're like, just say that. And it's like, no, it's Australian. Okay.
Saying, no, you're an asshole.
All right. Well,
that's all I got.
All right, then let's call it. Let's put this movie behind us. Obviously, it gets big fat thumbs down from everybody. I do not recommend watching this under any circumstances.
Drunk and high. If you're both very high
And even then, there are better things you can do with your time.
and very drunk.
If you're drunk and or high and have literally watched every other movie, then you
Sure.
just want to go.
Go ahead.
If you're looking for an educational experience, read a book.
If
Keep
you
looking.
thought Ernest was the greatest film you ever saw, any one of the Ernest films, and you've watched them all 1,000 times, you're like, God, I just need more of this in my life, but less good.
It's a shame that this episode unfolded in a way where we compared him to Ernest / Jim Varney, because the people at home don't know this, but I like to change the file on the recording when I upload it for Kris so that he laughs at it later. And I named this recording Australian Pauly Shore. So we just didn't go the route I thought we would.
Mm. I see the comparison there too. I think it's more of an Ernest situation, but yeah. No.
Maybe he is the Australian Pauly Shore because he did not work out.
Well, that means this episode's going to get a lot of views.
Did Ernest ever make like a movie called The Importance of Being Earnest?
That would have been amazing.
It would have been on point.
He should have.
We did it, folks. We did it. We got all the way through the alphabet. This is the one. Next.
Not until the next episode.
Well,
we
yeah.
haven't.
I mean, we're here. We're at the finish line.
Yeah, we're at the finish line. We made it through the alphabet.
Last vote. Last vote of the alphabet.
What are we gonna do
start-
after the alphabet?
We go back to A, right?
We're gonna start over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we have to get back to B because Kris still hasn't seen Big Trouble in Little
Yeah.
China.
I thought we were
can
gonna
start over.
I thought we were gonna pick a number.
I mean, we could do
We
one
could do
month where
one
we do a
month.
number movie.
Yeah, that's fine if we want to do that.
I think we should.
Well, that's good. That's
All right,
good.
fair enough. Then after Z, we'll do number.
We'll do a
With,
number
like-
and then we'll go back.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
We got to pick Z's. We got to pick Z movies.
Yeah, let's do it.
Who's going first?
Can I go first? Because I don't have a backup.
ahead.
Okay, go for
I
it.
don't have a
Backups
backup
for
if you don't
days.
pick mine. All right, so So I think I've said this to you all before. I think sometimes Kris is like, "Hey, I've got all these podcasts. Do you listen to them?" And I'm like, if anybody who's listening doesn't know, we shameless plug here. We on this podcast are part of a podcast network, and Kris also does one about television shows and about video games and video game music and music. So there is a wide range of things to choose from. I just often tell Kris, like, well, I guess if you want me to listen to them, you got to do a crime one because, like, this, I don't know why, but like this has become my thing. I'm into true crime. Like, it's not a thing I knew about myself a long time ago, but like now, like, I don't know, I'm kind of hooked on it. Like every week, I'm like, all right, I got to listen to this one this day, and I got to try to solve this mystery on Wednesday. And
Is it My Favorite Murder? Are you listening to
I don't listen to that one. We've been over this. Like I probably should listen to it. I listen to those two on other podcasts, but yeah, I listen to the guy that that helped catch the Golden State Killer, and I listen to. There's a lot of stuff I listen to. I listen to like crowdsourcing things where like I think I'm gonna solve something. But anyway, I think one of the reasons that this is a fascination of mine is because of my Z movie. It's hard to say whether it's like based on the real event or whether it's based on the book, or like based on both, because the book is the real event. And so like I guess it's just murders. You got to have some angle. You got to have something that you're following. But my pick is gonna be Zodiac. When I saw that movie, it really sucked me in, and like I became like obsessed with like who, because I think the thing about it is like it could be anybody, like it could be your grandpa, like, and we don't know who Zodiac was. Could be anybody. So
it was me, Paul. I'm the Zodiac.
It was Yahoo Serious.
FBI, if you're listening, that was a joke.
So
the FBI's not listening.
Yeah, that is gonna be my pick, is Zodiac.
All right, well, I'll go next. My pick is a movie called Zathura, and this is only because I know it is somehow tangentially related to Jumanji, which I thought was a pretty fun movie, and it's basically Jumanji in space. It's got an interesting like cover that I used to see when I worked at Game Crazy, which was attached to Hollywood Video, and I've never seen it, and I don't know that I know anybody who has seen it, but I know that it was like they were trying to push it in a lot of places, but not hard enough to make anybody actually watch the movie. So it's called Zathura. It's Jumanji in space. I want to watch it.
All right. Well, so I'm aware of both of your movies. I don't think I have a positive zeitgeist connection to Zathura. I think maybe it came off as a pale comparison or a pale redo of Jumanji, so I'm a little hesitant on that one. And Zodiac, I kind of half saw one time while Jacqueline was watching it. I tend not to watch real crime stuff because, I don't know, life sucks. I just don't need more of this shit. So I'm a little hesitant in that. And I'll be honest, there was a couple Z movies that might be good that I decided against. And despite your poor choices, in my opinion, or my lack of confidence in your choices, I'm not going to switch it up. I'm going to stick with the bullshit I decided on. So I thought I could do Zoolander 2. I thought that. I liked Zoolander, and I never saw the sequel. Maybe it was good. Maybe I could do Zombieland 2. I loved Zombieland. Never saw the sequel. No reason. No reason at all. But no. I decided that my offering this week would be Zapped. If you haven't heard of Zapped, it's a movie I saw on the video shelf in Blockbuster for years and years, and Video Depot, if you're South Jersey oriented, and never rented. It's probably a piece of crap, but it stars Scott Baio. So it's a 1980s movie that I remember seeing on the shelf of the video store for years and years and years and never picking up. I know nothing about it. I never saw it. Could be absolute crap, and I really was counting on one of you two to put forth something of real value. I don't feel like you have.
No.
So I feel like we have three real questionable choices going into Z here, folks. So that's what I'm going with. I'm going to stick with my bad choices, You're going to make bad choices in life, at least stand by them.
Say the magic word and vote. Oh, there it is.
Unbelievable.
Scott Baio it is.
Scott Baio for the win.
Well,
we just
guess
watched a bad movie. Jesus.
guys could have picked Thora.
I did. What did I write? I wrote Cthulhu, but
Cthulhu.
you know what I meant.
Let's do that movie then.
All right,
Well, zapped it is. We're going to watch a
Scott Baio gem.
1982 classic, R-rated Scott Baio Zapped.
Is anybody happy? Nobody's happy. Democracy fails again.
Look, I feel like I went through this with this movie. I think you guys blamed me, and I was like, "Don't blame me. I picked Young Guns." So I think it's something about not being able to vote for the one that you chose. Yeah, it's a fair thing. Like we can't really blame Sean. We're the ones that chose it.
The two of you unanimously voted for it.
Yeah,
That's true. That is true.
Right. Well,
I'm still sad we didn't get to watch The Wizard.
next time around the alphabet.
Yeah, we'll
Next
go
time
around the
come
alphabet
W.
again.
We can't wait for. We can't stop before we get to B, because the fact that Kris hasn't seen Big Trouble in Little China, it keeps me up at night. We got to get back to B.
I have no interest in stopping. There's a lot of good movies we haven't watched yet. All right. Well, there you go. There you have it. A theater near you is a part of the Geekade Podcast Network, and if you'd like to get in touch with us to share your comments, movie suggestions, or whatever, you can send us an email at mail@geekade.com. We can also be found on most social media outlets and the official Geekade Discord server, all of which can be found in our show notes. If you'd like early access to this podcast and several others on the Geekade Podcast Network, check out the Geekade Patreon, linked to in the show notes. It helps keep this show running week after week, or month after month, as it were, and our site shiny and clean. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time in a theater near you.
Good night, everybody.
Don't forget to eat your kitten apple pies.
What the hell?